Wake up, NHL fans. It is Tuesday. This is your morning cup of hockey, and there is no Colby Cohen today, so I am a little bit off the hook, but we are welcoming on NHL insider Frank Seravalli to join me for the entire show today. We're going to talk about a ton of different things like Jack Hughes' participation in the All-Star game, some trade rumors, some names that might be a unique fit in certain places that I'm going to bring up to Frank. We're going to talk about the All-Star breakdown and how it's working, and then we're going to talk about the Eastern Conference, Western Conference teams that have jumped to the top of the standings and maybe are a Stanley Cup contender, as well as the Jack Adams Trophy. So before we get into all that, I want to welcome on NHL insider Frank Seravalli, who's going to be with me here all day. And Frank, I know Colby probably texted you on the side to please bully me all morning, but I would really appreciate it if you didn't put the foot on the gas all morning.
Look, I'm a nice guy. Why would I do that?
I don't know, man. You guys are boys from growing up. You never know. But I can also take the heat if you want to bring it to me, so I don't mind.
We'll see. So. We'll see if you can. I'll be the judge of that.
But I want to jump right in because yesterday, Greg Wyshynski from ESPN wrote an article about talking to Steve Mayer about Jack Hughes' participation in the NHL All-Star game, and it made a lot of New Jersey Devils fans upset. They don't want to see him play in the All-Star game if he's not going to join the team right after. I want to get your feelings on it and what you think Jack Hughes should do, what the right decision would be.
My thought process would be if you are not 100% healthy, meaning if you are not playing either right before or right after, that you shouldn't be participating. If you want to go and enjoy the weekend, awesome. You want to be part of the draft, amazing. But in terms of playing in the actual game, look, these things are glorified shinny competitions. We know that. It's more or less pond hockey. But in this case, the freak accident, we don't have to look very far in the New York area to understand that sometimes things just go wrong. Look at Philip Hedl and the collision that he had last week at the Rangers optional skate. How many guys were on the ice, Johnny? Three.
Yeah.
3 guys on the ice, and someone ends up with another concussion.
I mean, I think that's a different scenario, though, because, I mean, like the head issues. Jack Hughes suffered an upper body injury. It's not a reoccurring head problem that Hedl's been having. I mean, I think I get your point. It's not as likely to happen, I think, with Jack Hughes' injury as it was with Hedl's. I mean, Hedl's was being a little bit extra cautious, and he slipped up one day, and yes, it happened.
You answer me this?
Yeah.
Can you 100% rule out that every single player on the ice in Saturday's All-Star game will come away injury-free?
No, definitely not.
Okay, so doesn't that answer your question?
But anyone can get hurt at any time. I feel like if Jack Hughes is fully healthy to go, why not?
But Jack Hughes is not fully healthy, and he rarely seems to be fully healthy.
He's not fully healthy right now, but they are taking it day by day. And if he feels fully healthy come All-Star game, why not? It'd be a good tune-up, if anything, to go play in the game the following week, I feel like.
Okay, so here's my thing, and maybe it just stretches back to his rookie year.
Mm-hmm.
But I just feel like with Jack Hughes, when I watch him, because of his size, and not at all because of the way that he plays, I always feel like he's one of those guys that's one hit away from being out for a significant period of time. Fair or unfair?
No, that's fair. I mean, you look at a lot of these smaller guys in the NHL, and we haven't really seen Quinn Hughes play in legit playoff style hockey yet. And I think he's a guy that you'd be concerned about, come that time of year. But with Jack Hughes, and I think
Quinn feels he looks thicker to me. Is that not fair?
I don't think so. I mean, from seeing them both in person, they have like very similar body types. I wouldn't say Quinn's, much thicker, much bigger than Jack. If anything, Luke's clearly the strongest of the three, I would think, even though he's the youngest, just based on body type and maybe, being in college a little bit longer than Jack, who didn't go to college. And that could be an effect too, right? Jack never really had that year or two in the gym that Quinn and Luke had playing at Michigan. That goes into development as well. But I think it's just, with the All-Star game, like you said, Frank, anyone at any given point can get hurt. And if Jack feels healthy enough to play, I think it benefits him. It benefits the NHL because he will be playing in a real hockey game probably a couple of days later if he is fully healthy. So why not get out there, feel the puck a little bit? There's not going to be any hitting. I think it's just a good thing to get him kind of going for a real game action.
Hey, I understand where the league is coming from. I understand where Jack Hughes is coming from. He wants to, anytime you're injured, you want to be on the ice no matter what. And if you can participate in this case with your brother, well, that's pretty cool too. I mean, I understand the pull. I guess if I were Tom Fitzgerald running the Devils, I'm expressing how I might feel if I were him.
Mm-hmm. Totally fair.
Because here's the thing. The truth is the Devils are out of runway. If Jack Hughes misses another significant chunk of time with all the other injuries that they have, especially on defense, you could probably stick a fork in their season.
I agree. I don't think the Devils stand a chance if Jack Hughes doesn't come back. He is their team. I actually spoke to Tyler Toffoli last week, and Toffoli even said it. Like, we play a much more team game when Jack's out of the lineup because we know he can take over a game when he's in the lineup. So it was interesting to actually hear him come out and say that straight up, that Toffoli was Colby's texting to come out and straight up say that they're a different team when Jack Hughes is in the lineup versus when he's not, because you'd like to think a guy is basically interchangeable and it's a seamless transition when he comes into the lineup. But with a player like Jack Hughes that can just take over a game any given night, it was kind of interesting to hear him come out and say that straight up.
Devils 3-6-1 in their last 10. Lost 2 in a row. Sit tied with the Penguins in points percentage or caps, below the Penguins. A lot of people, depending on how you look at it, and you sort through the standings by points or points percentage. Some people don't consider the Penguins an authentic playoff team, and the Devils are below them. So do you have the Devils making the playoffs if Jack Hughes is back?
Jack Hughes is back. I still think they need to get a goalie. They're not getting any saves. I think that's been their biggest crutch. And obviously the injuries to the blue line have been huge too. I mean, they're missing their top pair. But I don't know, man. With Jack Hughes, I think they're such a different team. I really do think they can push and make the playoffs. I think Philly's coming out no matter what. So I think that'd be a team that the Devils can jump. But it's tough to say without getting the saves. I mean,
I wouldn't be shocked if you had the standings today, that the 8 teams that are in there right now are I'm not saying the same order, but the 8 teams that are in there now are the 8 teams that end up making it.
You think the Flyers are going to stick around and make it?
I think they certainly could. They've banked enough points already. And yeah, they've lost 5 in a row. And, they're not all that far away from being out of it. But also consider, like, this is how the NHL points standings work. I mean, you look at the Rangers, and they really haven't played good hockey in 2 months.
No.
They're still leading the division.
Yeah, but I think Carolina is going to jump that pretty soon. Carolina, to me,
but we've been saying that for 6 weeks now. Hey, Carolina's they're on their way. They're gonna hop the Rangers. They haven't done it yet.
Well,
because
since Christmas,
all you do is milk, squirt points. That's it. Bank points as much as you can.
Since Christmas, though, Carolina's 11-2-1. They've been playing pretty good hockey, and their power play, their penalty kill has been up there with the best in the league. Carolina's been, to me, one of the most trending upwards teams, I think, in the entire NHL since Christmas.
I agree. I'm totally. Yeah. We're saying the same thing, but all I'm saying is once you have banked the points, it's really hard for teams to topple you, because all you kind of need is one here or there every week. Not 1 point, but like if you have 4 games, get points in 3 of them or 2 of them, and you're on your way. Like, you're not really ceding much ground because it's that much harder to hop over teams.
Well, let me ask you this. Between the Islanders, Penguins, Devils, and Capitals, who are the 4 teams outside the wild card right now, which team do you think has the best shot at making it?
I'm going to say the Penguins.
Interesting. I actually think the Islanders. I don't know what the Islanders, to me, just under Patrick Waugh, I think that they will start to get it going here. I think after the All-Star break, I think Matt Barzal and Bo Horvat. This is also the year anniversary of Bo Horvat being traded to the Islanders. Once Ilya Sorokin, I think, gets back to what he's been in the previous years, because Sorokin hasn't really been, that game-changing goalie that we've seen in the past couple of years, where Sorokin
actually has been. If you could look at the underlying numbers, you could make the argument that this is like Sorokin's either best or second best season.
Really, compared to last year? I thought last year he was unbelievable.
He was, but if you actually look at goals saved above expected and all of those underlying things, the way his overall save percentage is not that impressive, but the way that he's bailed out this team with the number of high danger chances he's facing, they're elite numbers, and they're not even close to the playoffs without him.
I didn't know that stat.
And so you mentioned today's the 1-year anniversary of the Bo Horvat trade. And so I did pull up the NHL standings since then. The New York Islanders have played 79 games. They're 37, 26, and 16. So that's a 570 points percentage. .570 points percentage is, doing the math on the fly, 93 points. That in a good year is very borderline to make the playoffs. So in the year since, the Islanders have basically been average, right on the edge. They're a playoff team on the cusp. That's it.
I actually want to jump. No, but I want to jump back to the Sorokin thing quick, because I think you look at the underlying numbers, like you mentioned, you talk about goals saved above expected, but does the time of those saves matter? If you have a goal saved above expected, let's say in the first period versus the third period, where it can cost your team a game. I mean, think about all the overtime losses that the Islanders have. Like, that's a lot of extra points on the table where the Islanders, had they gotten that save from Sorokin, that's, maybe how many overtime losses do they have? Like 13 right now? They have 14 or no, 12 overtime losses.
I don't think the timing of it matters. And I'll tell you why. It's just over an 82 game season.
There's
I don't
a clutch factor though. A clutch factor.
Okay. Let me throw this next stat at you.
Mm-hmm.
The Islanders have 166 expected goals against. Okay. Mm-hmm. Here are the only teams in the league that have a higher expected goals against than the Islanders. Ready for this list? The Montreal Canadiens, Anaheim Ducks, Columbus Blue Jackets, Chicago Blackhawks, and San Jose Sharks. That's it. No one else that's even sniffing the playoffs is really even that close except Tampa. Tampa's at 162.
Yeah, it's rough.
It just goes to show you, not only have the Islanders not scored, they have a negative 22 expected goals differential, but they've given up the sixth most, you would think, expected goals against, high danger chances, everything that's associated with that. It speaks to how good Sorokin has been this year. Yeah.
They haven't been the defensive team that we're used to seeing, that's for sure. But they've also had a lot of injuries as well. Like, they've missed Pelech, they've missed Pulak, a couple injuries to their blue line. If they get a little bit healthy here in the second half, who's to say they can't go on a run? But that's, you can say that
neither of us picked the Devils, though.
Yeah.
Why?
No, I think, like I said before, the goaltending. That's been their number one issue. They can't get saves. They can't. The Devils aren't doing what?
I think it's a chicken and the egg thing. I really do. Their defense is no good.
Well, it doesn't help.
Well, I'm a huge fan of Luke Hughes and Simone Nemetz, but they're going to be two unbelievable defensemen. But you saw Damon Severson say it, was it last week or 10 days ago when he came through, that he knew that once the Devils got rid of him and Graves, that they were asking too much of their younger guys. And that was before Dougie Hamilton went out for the year and before Jonas Siegenthaler went down.
Yeah. I mean, I think that
how many teams can survive taking out the top four defensemen and their goalies still look good? You take 4 out of your 6 from last year's team that had a decent playoff run, and how many goalies are going to look good in that situation?
Yeah, not many. But I would pick the Islanders.
Is it really the goaltending?
It's a mix of both. And I think even Lindy Ruff has said that. I mean, he said, I was at the game against Vegas, and he said, I'm always looking for more saves. I need saves. I think he's obviously one to be a little bit more protective of his players, but he flat out said, I need more saves. Like, you can't allow 4 or 5 goals a night on goals that maybe, a wrist shot from the top of the circles. You can blame a defenseman for a bad gap, but that should never go in on an NHL goalie. Like, those are just goals that have to be stopped.
I get it. I find it interesting that I think the hardest part for Tom Fitzgerald and the Devils is to figure out how aggressive to be. I mean, they've got a lot of surgery to do just to get in. Are they expecting that Dougie Hamilton could be back for the playoffs? That might change the scenario a bit. But I still think they'd have to improve their defense and improve their goaltending. To do that all at one deadline is going to be not only expensive, but hard to do. The market's not that great.
We have gotten a little bit off topic. I want to jump back to the All-Star break before we go into just some East.
It is what we say it is.
Well, I mean, I could talk about this for the entire day, and I want to talk about the All-Star break just a little bit, or the All-Star game at least, because there's a lot of things that I think people don't really know. And I was wondering if you can explain how the draft is working, who maybe has the first pick. I don't even know if that's been decided yet.
I actually don't know the answer to that question.
Okay, but it is 3-on-3 this year. There are 4 teams. They are doing drafts, but who do you want to see play with who? Because I think it's interesting to see like Draisaitl and McDavid. Let's say they get the first pick. Who would you want to see with those 2 guys in the All-Star?
First off, I think it's kind of cheesy that those 2 guys are together.
But
Get those guys
that's
on
how they're
different
kind of
teams.
grouping everybody.
Well, yeah, I know, but
Yeah.
spice it up. Like, we don't need to see another version of the Edmonton Oilers. I'm all good. We get that 82 times a year plus playoffs. Like,
I was
let's
talking to
get
our producer Vic.
but let's allow in our imagination to wander a little bit and say, Draisaitl, he played with so-and-so at the All-Star game. They appeared to have impeccable chemistry. I wonder if whenever he becomes a free agent, is there any chance he'd consider leaving? I'm playing it up for drama's sake, but my point is, why do we need to see those 2 guys play on the same team for what?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good point. We see them play together all the time. Like Quinn Hughes and Jack would be fun.
It would have been juicy to see if McDavid, if he gets the first pick, for instance, does he take Leon?
I think he would.
I mean, they're best friends. We would think that would happen, but what if the Hughes brothers get the first pick and they took Leon? I mean, that's what would make for drama. That's what would make for fun. And that's really how you spice it up to me.
Well, there's a good question for you, because who does Austin Matthews take first, Mitch Marner or Willie Nylander? Or does he even take them?
It'd be more fun if he didn't.
Yeah.
It'd be more fun if someone else took them first so that he can't.
Mm-hmm. I think that's the play, but I don't know if NHL players are like that. I don't know if they're built like that to do that.
That's why if I'm the NHL, I force them to be like that. Sorry, like McDavid, you are the only captain here. It's not a joint captain thing. I mean, I could understand the Hughes brothers thing. You want to play that up, but short of that, like you don't need any help. You don't need any assistant captains. You have a co-captain that's a celebrity. That's all you need.
Me personally, all I'm looking for is for Sidney Crosby and Connor McDavid to play together. I think they've talked about it on the national or international stage multiple times. They haven't really had the chance to do it. I think that'd be a really cool thing to see those 2 play together. So hopefully Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl go out and draft Sidney Crosby. That's what I'm looking for.
Do you think they're tired of talking about that?
100%, for sure.
That plus anytime, like how about McDavid earlier this year when the Blackhawks, they finally played the Blackhawks and he's like, this question again about Bedard. Like, it's just every generational guy gets asked about every other generational guy. And it goes on for, it feels like generations continuing to ask these questions. I'm sure they're tired of it.
Yeah. I mean,
but they're also probably intrigued, but every one of all 4 of those teams would love to have Sidney Crosby. So,
but who would you want to see Crosby play with most? Is it not McDavid? Like, it's got to be him.
I don't know. I think he'd be good anywhere. Again, I root for chaos. So I want whatever the most chaotic situation could be.
Okay. Well, that brings me to my next thing. Because speaking of chaos, I wanted to bring up someone that you wrote about a few weeks ago, Trevor Zegras with the Anaheim Ducks. There's a possibility maybe of him being shipped around, maybe not soon, but in the near future. And a team that I would like to see him go to, yes, because I live in this area, is the New York Islanders. I think the Islanders could use a little bit of spice in their lineup. I think Zegras could use a bit of a change of scenery. But is there one other player in the NHL? And I want to know if you think that's a good fit for both parties, because I'm sure Islander fans would say Zegras isn't the guy to get us a Stanley Cup, but I don't think the Islanders are one player away from winning a Stanley Cup. But do you think there's another superstar like Zegras right now in the NHL who needs a change of scenery more than him?
All right, I'm going to ask you a tough question to start first. Do you think Zegras is a superstar?
I think as far as being marketable, yes. I think as far as
marketable doesn't count. Like if you can,
not as a player.
You can do the Michigan, you can do the alley-oop, whatever you want to call it. You can be on video game covers, great personality, all those things. Would anyone say hockey-wise that Zegras is a superstar?
No, but I think all that stuff also has him overlooked as a player. Because this is still a young kid. He's 22 years old. He had back-to-back 60-plus point seasons. I know this year
without a lot of support. Yeah, I'm just playing devil's advocate.
This year was a little bit slower for him, but like this is still a really good hockey player that does have a ton of upside, in my opinion. He's so young. He's only 22 years old.
Okay, here's my next question.
Mhm.
How similar to Matt Barzal is Trevor Zegras?
Not much at all. I
Okay.
think Matt Barzal brings so much more to the table than Trevor Zegras does. I'm actually a huge
But
Matt
that's
Barzal
actually
fan.
he's gotten that pulled out
Comparison
of him on the island, I think, right? Like they've developed him into that. Is that not fair?
into the player or into the person you're saying?
Into the player.
Yeah. I mean, he hasn't been anywhere else to develop somewhere else.
No,
So
but
yeah, obviously.
he didn't the things Matt Barzal is doing now, he didn't start his career doing. Is that fair?
No, his rookie year, he had like 85 points. He was dominant.
Not it wasn't about the points. You said he brings so much more to the table.
As far as playing a complete game, yes.
He
But
didn't have that to start his career.
I still think he did a lot of incredible things to start his career. That first year, he was unbelievable. His rookie year, he was sensational.
Mhm. I think this year is his best year by far.
I agree. You see him now. He's even like lining up for one-timers. He's become more of a shooting threat, which he hasn't been before. But his skating, to me, like I've always said it, I think Matt Barzal is a top 5 skater in the NHL. And
I
I
buy
think
that.
watching 3-on-3 hockey, I think maybe behind McDavid, behind Draisaitl, and like Makar and McKinnon, I think Matt Barzal might be my next favorite to watch play 3-on-3.
Okay, here's my next question.
Mhm.
What do the Islanders have that the Anaheim Ducks would be interested in? That's the hardest question to
Yeah,
answer, I think.
yeah, yeah.
Because if you look at the Ducks, like they've got their defenseman on the way. You saw Olin Zellweger make his debut last week. Like they've got a bunch of really interesting pieces. Mintyukov has been really impressive to start this year. Like now you look at the group that they have in the forward, position with Cutter Gauthier, Mason McTavish. We're gonna see Leo Carlson. Like he's gonna, that guy's a budding superstar. Like he's the real superstar is Leo Carlson.
Mhm. I would say what the Islanders can give Anaheim, where both teams would somewhat benefit, is a guy like maybe JG Pageau, who's a responsible guy at the bottom of the
Nope.
lineup that can kill penalties, a little bit older.
No.
You don't think so?
No, JG Pageau is just another version of Adam Henrique.
Yeah, but he's on his way out.
That's my point. He's on his way out because they don't want/need him.
But
If
you
they
don't think they
wanted
should
him
have
and
any?
needed him, they would have just kept him.
You don't think they should have any sort of veteran presence in the bottom of their lineup that can kill penalties like that, like a JG Pageau?
What's Alex Killorn gonna do?
That's a good point. Yeah,
That's
there's
why they signed Killorn. They overpaid to bring in a veteran presence that, why not him?
I don't know if
I just think, okay, for one, I think to just set the baseline on where things stand with Zegras, I think we all not are in agreement, but understand that Trevor Zegras and the way that he plays may not be a fit for how Pat Verbeek envisions the Ducks playing.
Mhm.
That's one. Two is a trade is highly unlikely to materialize before the deadline because Zegras has been hurt. And three, because why would the Ducks, if they're going to actually consider moving Zegras, which I believe they will, and I believe they've already engaged in some conversations to do so, why would they do it now when you could have 16 other teams be in the mix come the summer?
I don't think they would do it now.
So it doesn't make any sense
Yeah.
to do it now. But so we're setting the table for the summer.
Yeah.
I just have a hard time. Like, first off, the Islanders desperately need a shot in the arm with some youth.
Yeah.
Like that's one thing that I think they're really struggling with is to try and turn it over to some of these younger guys. Noah Dobson, does he count kind of as young anymore? I mean, probably not. He's 300 games into his NHL career. I have a hard time finding something if I were like, if I'm the if I'm the Ducks, like I don't want more picks.
Mhm.
And they're probably going to be mid to, anywhere from 14 to 21 in picks next year. I want pieces that can help me get to where I want to get to. And I just don't know how many the Islanders can offer that are enticing if you're the Ducks.
Well, to your point about the youth, you look at the Islanders forward group right now, they only have 2 forwards that are under the age of 26. Like, this is
It's an
a
old
disgustingly
team.
old group. Yeah.
Yeah, it's an old team that has so many guys signed up for the future. Barzell, Horvat, Pierre Engvall, for some god unknown reason, Adam Pelech, Scott Mayfield, and Ilya Sorokin are all locked up through 2029 at least.
Mhm.
2029. Like
The May
2024 still feels like the future to me. I don't know about you, but I'm like 2029. I can't even count that high.
the Mayfield contract is probably the craziest.
No, the Engvall contract
You
is the
think so?
craziest. Why on earth? Why on earth would you give a player of that impact on your team 7 years?
At least he's 27 years old. Mayfield's already like 31.
Okay, but what is the best case scenario for Pierre Engvall? Yeah, I know he does more than, obviously put up points. And yeah, so some may say, "Oh, this guy's in tremendous shape. He's chiseled like a Greek god," is what I was told.
Islander fans love him though. He's loved around here
For what?
because I think he plays that like that Barry Trotz style that the Islander fans have become obsessed
Okay, yeah,
with.
you know who else did that in other markets? Think of guys that got super long deals. Okay. They never really worked out. This is a bad example, but the one guy that stood out to me was Kyle Clifford in LA,
Mhm,
5-year deal.
mhm.
Those guys aren't really all that dissimilar. Anytime you take super long deals and give them to guys of that ilk, I think by like year 4, you're like, okay, like this guy has served his useful purpose. We could have just done with 4 years.
But I think that's the problem too right now with a guy like Engvall because the Islanders roster was built toward that Trotz system, right? Like playing shutdown D, not scoring too many goals. But now under Patrick Waugh, it seems like they're kind of steering away from that a little bit. So I think there has to be some sort of reconstruction to fit more of what Waugh is going to bring as opposed to what Trotz brought to this team. Because the Islanders aren't going to score, 2-3 goals a night and just shut it down now. That's not how this team's going to work. So that's why the Zegras
That's
thing
how they
kind of
want it to work.
but it's not gonna. Yeah, it's not gonna with how they're built. So that's why the Zegers thing in my mind was interesting because you bring in somewhat of an offensive player that might not be the most responsible in his own zone yet. He's still a young guy. He can figure it out as time goes on. But I think having a guy like him is not a centerpiece, but someone to support Matt Barzal a little bit, support Bo Horvat a little bit. Like the Islanders need more skilled players up front. They do. I know you have the respect for a guy like Anders Lee, and yes, Brock Nelson can score goals, but this roster isn't very talented up front.
I mean, I would tend to agree with you. And isn't that exactly why you don't give Pierre Engvall 7 years? Not to harp on him, but so let's take another comp
Mhm.
of Pierre Engvall, and I would look at
We actually got a
Colton.
comment in the chat about one. Jeremiah
How about
Maxwell.
Colton Sissons? Colton Sissons signed 7 years, $20 million bucks. So 1 million less comes out to 2.85 a year. Colton Sissons has almost triple the goals that Pierre Engvall has this year. He signed to a lesser cap hit, same term. They signed, I think, right around the same age. I mean, I'd see that as a somewhat worthy bet. He's already got 25 points this year. He's on track to finish just under 50 for under 3 million bucks. That's a steal.
Mhm.
I just don't think Engvall has the offensive capability to make it worth your while. To me, I think teams get into trouble when they overpay role players.
I'm looking for his career high in goals. Engvall has 5 this year. His career high is 15 and
15.
21-22 with Toronto.
And that's when
And
he got paid, right?
yeah. And Jeremiah Maxwell in the chat, who I want to shout out, actually said he reminds me of Brooks Like type player that played on the Washington Capitals.
Oh yeah,
And
Jeremiah's a Caps fan, right?
yeah, and Colby Cohen made a good point too. Colby's in the chat active. He's probably jealous and having fun that he's not here. But Colby said it doesn't make sense to give a
First
role
off, Colby is sick and twisted. If you couldn't make the show today, quit chatting.
play. That's true. Good point. But he did say to give a role player a long deal. I mean, look at Barclay Goodrow. That's a contract that's a nightmare in New York as well for the Rangers. Fourth line guy making $3.6 million.
I just said it. Teams get into trouble when they
Yeah.
overpay role players. Can you get someone to give you exactly what Pierre Engvall gives you for $1 million a year? Probably.
Mhm.
And for a team that has cap strapped itself and has continued to double, triple down, quadruple down on this roster, where like they've got to find avenues and ways, the Islanders do, to turn things over and dig up some new ground. And I just don't know how they're going to be able to do that.
Yeah, it's going to be tough. I mean, the Islanders, again, like they're a team I feel like that's been knocking on the door these past couple years that just don't have the personnel to get it done. And it's sad because I think the Islanders right now, they've done everything just as a part of their organization. They've done everything the right way over the last decade to make them a more attractive organization for players to come in. They built
Well,
a
it
new
is.
practice rink.
That
Yeah.
arena is unbelievable. Their
Mhm.
practice facility is great. They finally feel like a major league team in New York, which is they've sort of been in the shadows. I covered many a game at Nassau Coliseum. I just I don't agree with you in terms of where they're at. After they fell short, they had those runs to the East Final. They had two of them. And the year after that, when they fell short, that should have been when they started to turn the wheel a little bit and think. And instead, they were like, oh, we're just going to sign everyone to 7 and 8 year deals.
Mhm.
And I mean, look, this team, there are going to be very few changes for next year. You've got your top 7 highest paid forwards back, your top 4 highest paid defensemen back, both of your goalies. Tell me how different this team's possibly going to be next year if they don't make it this year.
Well, I don't think they're a contender. I think they're a playoff team. I don't think they're a legit Stanley Cup contender.
That's what I'm saying. So if you're
Yeah.
not a threat, all you do is double and triple down on a barely playoff team, and now you've left yourself no wiggle room to get out.
Mhm.
Good luck.
Mhm. Yeah.
Good luck.
Well,
And
Frank,
you're
I
old.
also,
You just mentioned you're old.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, they like I said, 2 forwards under the age of 26. It's insane. But I want to go into your trade board. As we approach the trade deadline here, there's a lot of names that you have floating around that I'm curious about the order you put it in. Is it the best available player that you have this list made at, or the most likely to get moved?
It is a combination of impact,
Mhm.
availability, and likelihood of a trade. So that's a pretty good peek at it. Um, it's a moving, living, breathing list. It's updated every week, and then once we get closer to the deadline, a couple times a week, and then every day. So it's something that is going to constantly continue to evolve.
And to you, who's the most interesting name on this list right now? Who do you think can really boost a team, and which team do you want to see boosted most at the deadline?
I think high impact guy has got to be number one, Elias Lindholm. I
Mhm.
think, look, he's not going to take a team that's a borderline team and turn them into a cup contender. But I think what he can do is take a cup contender and turn them into a favorite. And the support that he provides at that 2C position, the flexibility of, hey, you know what? Our top line center is hurt. Lindholm can carry the ball for you. And he's someone that when he's playing with elite players, like go back and look at his last year with Johnny Gaudreau and Matthew Tkachuk. 42 goals, 82 points. Um, like high impact player that can really do a lot. And I think the biggest question is with all these teams that need centers, how many of them are willing to pony up and pay a big price for Lindholm, and how much do they like him? So there's a lot of competition there. I would imagine, you're talking about Colorado, Boston, Vancouver, Winnipeg. Like you're thinking of some of the biggest teams in the league in terms of standings and, being in that tight circle of cup contenders. Those are all teams that are right there.
Well, teams that aren't right there are the Chicago Blackhawks, and we have a question from Ian Gallagher in the chat. What are Frank's thoughts on Friedman saying Kuzmenko to Chicago?
So I did check in after I heard that yesterday. Um, my understanding is the Blackhawks have not reached out to the Canucks in any way about Kuzmenko. I think it's probably just a name that's on their list internally to look at to say, hey, If this guy becomes available and the Canucks aren't asking anything for him, essentially, if he becomes a salary cap casualty and or dump this year with 1 year remaining on his deal, that's a player that the Blackhawks might be interested in, given that he's 1 goal away last year from 40 goals and 75 points. I mean, that was his first foray into the NHL, and he looked pretty damn good. This year, he's been a square peg in a round hole and sort of can't navigate the non-negotiables that Rick Tocchet has for the Canucks. So for Kuzmenko, I think the Canucks are going to try and be patient. He's looked a little better at times. He still had some egregious mistakes. And part of that might just be, look, when you're a healthy scratch, when you get into a game, sometimes you overthink it. And I think they've got a little bit of runway to figure this out. But if they're really serious about adding significant pieces, Kuzmenko has to be the odd man out to make room for money.
And I'm curious to hear your thoughts on if there's any like sleeper team that could be secret buyers at the deadline.
Secret buyers?
Like someone who's not really in the mix right now in the playoffs. Like a team I'm thinking of is like the St. Louis Blues. You know, like they were
not a buyer.
Not a buyer.
No, even if they're in a playoff spot, they could be a seller. That's why the West is so fascinating. You've got your 7 teams. I'm going to include the Kings in that group for now, thinking that they're probably going to make it, out of this rut that they've been in. But you've got 7 teams in the West that are, at least 6 that are legit. The Blues certainly aren't in that category. And Doug Armstrong has acknowledged publicly to me, I did a Frankly Speaking podcast, had him as a guest in November at Hall of Fame. He was unbelievable. Go and listen to his thought process on how to build a cup contending team. And he said point blank, we're not there and we're a few years away. So if that's the case and that's authentic, which I believe it is, then you should be selling off pieces, not trying to buy. So I would think the Blues, I think we know the Flames, but the Preds are not really in that different of a situation as the Blues. Those 2 teams neck and neck. The Preds, Barry Trotz has acknowledged like, hey, we're 2 to 3 years away from being where we want to be. Let's move some pieces.
And you mentioned those 6 teams in the West. I'm curious to hear which team you think the West runs through right now.
My original Stanley Cup pick this year was the Dallas Stars, and I don't see any reason to deviate from that. They've survived stretches this year without Jake Ottinger, without Miro Heiskanen. I look at their lineup. I don't see any holes. They've got the goalie with pedigree that has proven playoff success. I think maybe like if you squint hard enough, you could be like, you know what? We need a 3rd pair defenseman. Okay. Like can't really cost you that much. I don't see a lot of weaknesses in this Dallas team. And I think really why I'm sticking with that answer, and knowing that the Avs have had playoff success, knowing that they've won a Stanley Cup recently and McKinnon has been in video game mode this year and the Jets have defended as well as they have. The Jets actually lead the division in points percentage. For me, I think Dallas's game with how heavy they play is so easily translatable to the playoffs. And I think they're going to be really well positioned once they get there.
I actually agree with you. I think Dallas and Florida play a pretty similar style, East versus West, as opposed to comparisons.
Florida would be my pick in the East.
Yeah. I said to Colby yesterday, I think there's no team in the NHL right now that has a better mix of heavy and skill than the Florida Panthers right now. Like I think everyone's
also really fun to watch.
Yeah, they're a blast.
And their goaltending has held up.
So Colby gave me a lot of shit yesterday that I didn't have the Oilers as the best NHL team currently right now because of their 16-game win streak. And I want to just read out the teams they've beaten because I tried to explain to him yesterday that the wins haven't been very impressive. I know they won 16 in a row, but they haven't beaten legit teams in that win streak. And I just want to read it out because I want to hear your thoughts on the Oilers too. I know their stats are great right now since Christmas.
Okay.
They're 14-0-0, scoring 3.64 goals a game, allowing 1.29 a game, and their power plays at 29%, PKs at 95.5%, which to me is the most impressive number. But here are the teams that the Oilers have beaten on their win streak in order: the Devils, the Rangers, Sharks, Kings, Ducks, Flyers, Senators, Blackhawks, Red Wings, Canadians, Leafs, Kraken, Flames, Jackets, Blackhawks, Predators. Like,
all I heard was blah, 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 blah. That doesn't mean shit.
You don't think so?
Why would it? I mean, you can only play who's lined up to face you. And more than that, they already got through the meat of their schedule. They went through an absolute sausage grinder the first, 6 to 8 first 2 months of the season. Their reward on the back end of this after the holidays was that their schedule got significantly easier. And in fact, it was something that was a big topic of conversation in the Edmonton media was like, hey, just survive this gauntlet and we'll be good.
Yeah, but they struggled through that gauntlet. They had to fire their coach.
Not really. They back up a second, bud. They had a 16-game winning streak.
I just got butted.
16-game winning streak, 3-game losing streak, 8-game
Mhm.
winning streak. I'm pretty sure they beat some good teams during that 8-game winning streak.
Mhm. So that brings us to my next point.
That makes them 24-3 in their last 27 games. Are you going to tell me that all 27 of those teams were shit?
No. And there's never an easy game in the NHL. We all know that. But I still think
not according to you.
I think there's easier games on the schedule. There's not easy teams to beat, but I think it'd be a little bit more impressive.
So let me rewind back just to like play Oilers, whatever for a second.
Mm-hmm.
Oilers supporter. Are you one of those people last year that was saying, oh, well, Draisaitl's season is not really that impressive. Look how many goals he has on the power play. He's the power play merchant.
No, I'm not a power play merchant guy. I think your power play is just important as anything else. And
last time I checked, the goals count the same.
I hate when people everyone gets on top of Mika Zibanejad for that, calling him a power play merchant. And I know that he hasn't been as strong at 5-5 this year, but your power play is arguably as important as anything. If your power play is not clicking, guess what? You're not winning the Stanley Cup. Like, I don't know one team that's won a Stanley Cup that's had a shit power play in the last few years.
Not many.
Yeah. So I'm with you on that one. I agree with you on that one. Or disagree with you. I don't know. I think you're on the same side as me here.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is you just made the same argument about the wins.
Are you saying wins or wins? Wins or wins? Is that the point you're trying to make?
Yes.
Yeah, I know that wins or wins, but I think everyone's like freaking out about how the Oilers are the best team in the NHL now because of this win streak. But listen, had they had to go through Colorado, had they had to beat Winnipeg on this win streak, had they had to play the Boston Bruins, like
their previous 8-game winning streak before that. So as part of this 24-3, they beat the Caps, Ducks, Golden Knights, Jets, Canes, Wild, Devils, Hawks. Jets, Golden Knights, and
Canes, Jets, Vegas,
and Canes, and I would add like the Devils are a fringe playoff. Like they're not nothing.
We just crapped on the Devils 30 minutes ago.
Yeah, but they're not the Ducks or the Blackhawks. Like
yeah.
So here's how I look at the NHL, and tell me if I'm crazy. There's 5 elite teams. There's 22 average teams, and then there's 5 dog shit teams.
It's funny. I mean, I kind of have a similar, not this year, but the way I just like talk about teams is there's elite teams, there's great teams, there's good teams, there's bad teams, and there's shit teams. I have those.
That's too many categories.
Yeah, I know. But that's like my own Jonny Lazarus metric.
Whatever kind of math that is, that ain't math.
Okay, so with this Oilers win streak, I want to talk about Jack Adams. Is Kris Knoblauch in that conversation? He's got to be, right?
I don't know how he couldn't be, but he wouldn't be my pick.
Who would be your pick right now?
Rick Tocchet of the Vancouver Canucks.
And it's because of last year to this year, that progression?
Non-playoff team. The Oilers were always a playoff team. And I was saying that even during their rough start. And frankly, I advocated, and I'm not saying that they made the wrong move. It's hard to argue with the results, but Jay Woodcroft is a good coach. I think the change that they should have made was bring Paul Coffey on the bench in exchange for Dave Manson, which they finally did, but only once they made the head coaching change. That's been a huge difference for the Oilers. They defend so much more efficiently. And again, I'm not taking anything away from Kris Knoblauch's candidacy, but I don't think you can overstate the impact that Paul Coffey has had on the Oilers. But the Canucks, they had no structure, no discipline, no system. They had star players that were meandering, and they have been one of the most consistent teams. And everyone remember the first month of the season, the hot topic at the end of October was, when are the Canucks going to regress?
Yeah.
Last time I checked, they hit the All-Star break tied for the league lead in points. 8-0-2 in their last 10 coming in.
10-2-2 since Christmas.
I mean, where's the drop off? The consistency has been there. And I think a lot of people would argue that this Canucks roster is still kind of imperfect. Like I think they've got some places that they can fill in and help this team come the deadline to really vault them into that super contender category, the threats. And I think they've come a long way, but a big reason for that is the coach.
Well, that brings me to this. What's the latest on Elias Pettersson? Because he's got to stick around if they're going to have any success, right?
I think, look, the Canucks are it. You finally heard a little bit of them cracking when Patrick Allvin gave an interview to Sportsnet's Ian McIntyre, and he did mention, like, it's pretty highly unusual for a player of this magnitude to be unsigned. And look, he's an RFA, like, we get it, but the Canucks have made every effort, and I have no indication that this is about money or term. The Canucks are willing to work with him. They're willing to, break out the Brinks truck and write the check.
Mm-hmm.
And he's just kind of in his own world. He's like, he almost doesn't want to be bothered by it during the season. And I would say it hasn't bothered him to this point. So just sign your name on a piece of paper that makes you a very wealthy man. That's like, because like, let's consider the deadline now, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's really hard for the Canucks to go out and trade for a player with term, not knowing
where they stand with them.
Yeah, Pettersson's going to be such a big part of their cap picture moving forward. Even if you pencil him in at 12.5 or whatever and work off of that assumption, you still need to sign Filip Hronek, and you can't really sign Hronek until you figure out Pettersson first, and then you want to trade for someone that might have some term to work into your team. I think he's frustrating them, and I think he's getting in the way of their ultimate plotting and planning for the deadline because he's not signed. And I think they're going to try and pursue it again during this All-Star break. Let's get this done. Let's have another conversation and let's see what happens.
Do you think the longer this holds off, will it affect them come playoff time? Like not knowing where they stand with him?
I don't know. I think once you get past the deadline, it doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm. Do you think at all that the Canucks this year are the Devils of last year? Where it's somewhat of a magical run, and then maybe that run just like the ceiling is the second round?
No, because I think the difference is the Canucks have a goalie. The Devils, they were changing guys back and forth last year. Schmid came in and played well. Mm-hmm. Vanacek obviously isn't the answer. I think that was one situation where a team not almost exclusively lost because of their goaltending, but that was a pretty clear indication to me what they were missing. The Canucks don't have that, and they've got some players that have some experience around them. It's rare to see a team that doesn't have the sort of playoff experience and losses as a group to, kind of climb all the way to the top of the mountain. But I'm intrigued to see how this Canucks team does. I think this West is murderous, and I think there's going to be 3 teams that lose in the first round in the West that are going to be absolutely gutted, and they're really good teams.
Yeah, it's a shame. And
it's not a shame. That's how life works.
I'm laughing because Kobe's still writing in the chat and said 2011 Boston Bruins didn't score a power play goal the entire first round. Our power play sucked. Yeah, that was 13 years ago. That's not the same NHL anymore. I think
it's the exception for sure.
But also a good power play. I feel like in 2011, like the power play percentage was probably like 20% was a really good power play in the NHL.
Were you 6 years old then?
I was 15.
Yeah.
15.
Okay.
Yeah. But do you not agree? Like the power play percentage, the success rate has gone up each year where, maybe 13, 15 years ago, a 20% power play is a pretty good power play. Now that benchmark's probably like north of 25.
Yeah, the numbers have changed a bit,
Mhm.
but your point is still well made in that it's pretty rare to see
Yeah.
teams get through all the way without their special teams working. Both of them for that matter.
Kobe's just trying to bring up the fact that he has a Stanley Cup ring in the chat.
Yeah, he does.
Yeah.
But is his name on the cup?
No, it's not. I don't think. He's going to yell.
It's not.
Yeah. Yeah. Frank, any final thoughts for wrap up today's show? I really appreciate you taking the time this morning.
Final thoughts. This was fun. I love sparring with you.
Uh-huh.
Tell Colby to get off the chat and get in the show. And yeah, looking forward to seeing you guys in Toronto.
Did I hold my own today?
You did. You were good. You only had a few, sort of
hiccups.
Yeah, no, not hiccups, but just a few weak opinions. That's all right.
Okay. Fair enough. Fair enough. Thank you, Frank, and I'll see you in Toronto. I appreciate it. Thanks everyone for listening, and thanks to our producer Vic. We'll talk to you guys tomorrow.
What's up, hockey fans? If you enjoyed that video, then you need to be hitting the subscribe button right here at Daily Faceoff. Exclusive interviews and analysis from our hockey insider Frank Seravalli, fantasy updates from Brock Sagan, and a daily live show at noon Eastern Monday through Friday. You don't want to miss any of the fantastic content, so hit that subscribe button.